Hello and welcome to episode 289 of the Total Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. A huge thank you to our TSP Patreon community because we couldn't make this show each week without your loyal support. Coming up this week on the podcast, on paper at least, Manchester United at home was probably one of the easier games we've faced recently, and for 30-ish minutes that looked to be true. However, it turned out to be another wretched afternoon that ended in defeat. So we'll look at what went wrong. On Tuesday evening, it's the third round of the Carabao Cup. Saints travel to Goodison Park to face Everton. We'll preview what changes we can expect to see to the side and have the must-win klaxon handy because Ipswich are up next in the Premier League. So we'll look ahead to that one. My name is Martin Starke, and I'm joined this week by Steve Grant, who is the owner of Saints Web. Glen Cour is writer of the blog League 1-10, and Alfie House is senior Southampton reporter for the Daily Echo. It's a full house this week, and it's great to have you all with us. Now, it's a bit like Groundhog Day, isn't it? We played well for 30 minutes, didn't take our chances, and it cost us the game. Glenn, Russell Martin promised the side would look different. Were these the changes that we were expecting yesterday?
I think so. I didn't see anyone really disagreeing massively when the team was announced. I think it was probably. Well, I think Stevens and Harwood-Bellis was a toss of a coin in my mind. You know, Harwood-Bellis hasn't played well this season. You know, Stevens has probably been better than him. So that was the only one that was a toss of a coin. I was a bit concerned at the start because him and Bednarek has never really worked as a pair whenever we've tried it in the past, but. Yeah, give that a go. I thought that, the midfield looked balanced, that you had Fernandes in there to give a bit of flair, Big Les and Downs to sort of like add a bit of muscle. Cameron Archer kind of had to start to give us a focal point. Change in formation was obviously something that was needed for that. And and it was still a surprise to me to see Tyler Dibling start, but we're only saying it's a surprise because of his age. If you just look at ability and the impact that he's had in his substitute appearances and in the Carabao Cup game, then there's no reason at all why he shouldn't start. And Russell Martin said that. So no, Russell Martin said before the game that he had to balance out loyalty to players who did well last year with the levels that they are now. It is a completely different level of competition. And it's a completely different assignment. And this is not really a new thing. Every team that gets promoted has to make these decisions on players that have done previously, very well for them. I mean, just thinking off the top of my head, when we got promoted in 2012, Billy Sharp and Dean Hammond were two of the the most important players in that promotion campaign, and they were basically binned off before the season started. They didn't get any time at all, and there's numerous others. Again, off the top of my head, Danny Fox, Richard Chaplow, they just become surplus to requirements very quickly, and that unfortunately is the brutal reality of getting promoted. You go back even. I mean, it's interesting. Adam Armstrong is the one, obviously, because he's very similar to Billy Sharp in lots of ways, in that he's done it in the Championship, but never really shown that he could do it in the Premier League. If you go back, I mean, and he scored probably our second most important goal in history. But you look at the guy who scored the most important goal, Bobby Stokes, the following season, the assignment changed, and we were looking to get promoted. And I don't know, many people realise he only actually played about 10 more games for Saints before he was surplus to requirements. So it does happen. So. I was quite encouraged by the fact that Russell Martin was prepared to look at those first three games and say that things need to change. These guys haven't. I've given them, albeit not a vast amount of games, to show what they could do, and they haven't really shown enough yet to warrant leaving these new signings and Tyler Dibling out of the team. So no, I was happy with the way he went about things. I was. Pleasantly surprised, I guess, but I did expect him to show the ruthless streak. I briefly heard you guys talking about it last week about the fact that he did show it at various points last season that he could do that. So yeah, I was pleasantly encouraged, and for the first half an hour, it looked it looked like it was a really good call, but we had issues after that, which I'm sure the other guys will get onto.
What was it, Alfie, about that first half hour that impressed you the most? We've all kind of said how great that was, and we're clinging on to that because I think there's a lot of positives to take from it. But what kind of worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there was just a renewed energy and enthusiasm, and the players coming in obviously had a point to prove. Someone like Tyler Dibling, for example, I mean, it took 6 minutes for him to sit Diego Dallo down and nearly actually get his first goal, but for a good save from Andre Onana. And I mean, that just sort of lifts the entire team and just gives you that forward impetus. I think that I was a big proponent of the fact I don't think that necessarily the system is the reason why Saints have been banned for the first 3 games, but the change did help, clearly, to start with. I thought it was a good idea to play Leslie Ugochukwu and Flynn Downs in a pivot. It was one more change than I thought he'd make. I thought he'd make 3 changes with the 3, including Tyler Dibling, that he brought in. I didn't expect him to drop Joe Aribo for Leslie. But
I was going to say, I didn't see your predicted 11, so I wasn't sure how many of the 11 you got right on that one.
Yeah, but I suppose with that, if you're going to play a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1 as it was, you probably couldn't have Joe Aribo, Flynn Downs, and Matty Fernandez. Leslie offers a bit more control, a bit more protection of the back 4. So I suppose in hindsight, it's probably a change that I should have predicted. But I liked that. I thought that for the first 30 minutes, I saw a connection between Ben Brereton, Diaz, and Cameron Archer. They were playing forward passes. They were Cameron Archer particularly taking first touches, trying to flick things around the defenders. I don't think he actually put a pass wrong, Cameron Archer, in the entire game. Problem was he didn't have a pass after the 30th minute because he didn't touch the ball again. So I like the energy. I like that from the start. I thought Aaron Ramsdale kept the side in it again. He's been brilliant. So there's a lot to like about that, but it's just the mentality shift. And I tweeted at the time when the penalty was saved that this can't be a turning point. You know, Man United are going to be rejuvenated now. And, you know, I think it was 2 minutes and 31 seconds, I believe, between the goals. And, you know, from there, they just never looked like they were confident again. Their heads completely went the last 15 minutes, that half, and never really recovered.
We'll get into the bad stuff in a minute, starting with that penalty. Steve, I just want to get your take on that return to the sort of the 4-3-3 and the players that were taken out of the team. What was your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, even though, I mean, you look at the end result, and ultimately that is what it is. But I think that first half an hour, I think, showed that the players were comfortable in that system. And I think going forward, I think realistically, that's going to be our only realistic path to giving ourselves any sort of fighting chance in this division, is to play in that system where we effectively give ourselves 4 attack-minded players, and where you've got the double pivot with Downs and Ugochukwu in front of the back 4, that should provide a fair amount of protection. What you've got to be kind of wary of is one or both of those 2 getting caught the wrong side of the ball. And that, I think that was the problem in the last kind of 15 minutes or so of that first half, was that we were so eager to get ourselves back into the game at 1-0 down that actually we were kind of going too far, and it was almost like it was the last 5 minutes, and it was, well, it doesn't matter if we get caught on the break in those situations. But yeah, I think that system, as I say, works, especially against a side like United, who will give you space through the middle. Because I mean, as much as you look at the way that they've played all season and throughout most of last season, they're a team that any side will always fancy their chances against. At the end of the day, they've still got some very good players, and if they turn up on the day, then we could play our best game and we'd still probably lose. If they're
2000 and when was the last time we beat them at home 1-0? James Beattie scored, didn't it?
Yeah, James beat the 89th minute when I think Alex Ferguson complained that we'd left the grass long, not watered it. All the old tricks you used to be able to get away with that you basically can't now, because the Premier League has standardised everything, and there's like literally down to the fact that the grass has got to be a certain length and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's been that long since we've turned them over that even when we were good, like if you think like the Ronald Koeman years, for example, even in those times, we still never managed to beat them. which is very annoying. Obviously, given the, I mean, let's be honest, we all know a chippy United fan. Never been to Old Trafford, but has always got something to say when they play Saints.
Yeah.
And obviously, this week is going to be more of the same, unfortunately.
Sorry. I'll say it's 15 now winless against Man United, just for the record. 15 games in the league without a win.
Yeah. Tiring, isn't it?
So it's nothing new, but it could have been different, Glenn. A lot was made of the penalty, and was Archer the right man to take it? Hindsight is a wonderful thing, and people were quickly to jump on the stats about how maybe someone else should have taken it. Russell Martin afterwards said, "Well, that's on me. I made him penalty taker because he was here in the international break and he'd been practicing all week." So, do you just feel a bit for him, because if that goes in, then he's off and running, and it's not even a talking point?
I think it. Yeah, I mean, the shame is that he didn't just miss the penalty. I think it killed him for the rest of the game as well. He just didn't look the same player after that. I thought he was quite lively in the first half an hour. Bearing in mind he's playing up on his own against Lisandro Martinez and Matthijs de Ligt, who they've probably got 100 caps for their country between them. Their respective countries. So it's a tough game against those two. Both very good players. And I thought he did well for the first half an hour, but the penalty killed him. He didn't look confident at all. I do not know why on earth it took so long from the penalty being given to the penalty being taken, because it was 100% clear-cut penalty. There was no doubt about it.
So the debate, Glenn, was about whether it was inside the box or outside. It was so clearly inside the box. But
it was so clearly inside the box. It was so clearly a foul. I mean, I can't believe Dalot didn't get booked for it. He was so far from the ball. It's just mad why it took that long to reach that point. And I mean, Brereton Diaz was looking after the ball, wasn't he, doing that thing to make sure no one messed around with it. And then he gave it to Archer, and Archer suddenly, I know he's young anyway, but he looked about 14 taking that penalty. It just looked like he ain't gonna score. It was right in front of where I sit, and quite frankly, it was rubbish. If Onana went the right way, he saves it. It was about, I don't know, 4 foot inside the post. It wasn't very good. And the rebound, he had to try and put that back in the same spot, but couldn't get above it. So it was a simple save. It was a shame. I mean, Brereton Diaz was playing okay up until that point, and he's the one that obviously everyone thought would take it. Alfie was talking about him a couple of weeks ago, saying he would just put his foot through it, and that was obviously what was required. And if we'd gone in, if that had gone in, we probably would have gone in 1-0 at half time, and it would have been totally deserved based on the first half hour, because of the Ugachuk would put a header over the bar. Well, he shouldered it over the bar. You had Dibling's effort that Onana saved. Walker Peters got to the line, pulled one back, no one there. There was more in terms of attacking play and stretching the opposition defence than I think we've seen in the 3 games combined. So that was, and it just would have been the icing on the cake to have scored. But there's many things that make up a decent team, and scoring when you're on top is one of them, and reacting to setbacks is another one. And unfortunately, we failed on both counts, which is why 10 minutes later we're 2-0 down and the game's gone.
We've had a lot of comments already about Tyler Dibling. I want to give the 3 of you just a couple of minutes just to talk about him, Alfie. I mean, what a first start. Obviously, we thought it might happen. Lots to talk about him afterwards. It kind of feels like we knew he was a good player, and now everybody else knows that he was a decent player. There's a lot of chat about him yesterday. Yeah,
well, that's very much the nature of obviously the first game back from the international break, 12:30 kickoff on TV against the biggest club in the country. It was a huge stage for him, and I felt looking at him walking out and on the pitch before the game, I thought he looked nervous, which is totally understandable for an 18-year-old kid making their first start. But the second the ball gets going, you don't feel that at all. What was interesting after the match was Russell Martin said that he made his mind up on Tyler Dibling starting this game. It's the second the full-time whistle went at Brentford. He decided that Tyler Dibling was going to start this game. And I think probably in the back of his head regretted the fact he hadn't started him earlier. But he's just been trying to I suppose, expose him to what is going to be quite a relentless season, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on him, and all these expectations that he'll have to deal with in a staggered way, and just trying to build him up slowly. But I think he sees now that the time is now. You have to unleash him. You have to let him go and play. And he did 64 minutes, and I think that was about as much as he could do. He looked tired by the end, and I think it was the right decision to bring him off. And I would like to see him rested on Tuesday. I don't want him to play any part at Everton. I want him to be fully charged up and ready to start on Saturday against Ipswich. Yeah, there's nothing more that I can say about Tyler as a player that we don't already all know and agree with, because the way he moves the ball, the determination he has, he's the top dribbler in the Premier League at the moment on statistics. He's actually taken the ball further than any other player, despite the fact he's played about 100 minutes in terms of progressive carries. So, yeah, he does all the things that you need him to do, taking the ball from one side of the pitch to the other.
Steve, is it about enjoying a player like that while he's here? Because he's going to attract a lot of interest, isn't he? And that was the kind of my thought about it yesterday. Was like, oh right, okay. So if he's here for a year, then we'll be lucky, because I think even Paddy Powell were tweeting about how great he was yesterday, and those kind of people jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's obviously rare that you get a sort of a talent who looks like he's got the ability to be one of those sort of generational players. And yeah, I mean, I think ultimately all the good players that pass through a club of our size, I always think it's one of those where you do have to kind of cherish them while they're there, because realistically, anybody who is any good is ultimately going to end up playing for a bigger club at some point. You're not going to get the Matt Letizier's of this world anymore, where they're happy to kind of bumble along a little bit at a smaller club, happy to be a big fish in a small pond and be the kind of local hero. Because the money is just the money and the fame and the glory, really, of playing for the bigger clubs and winning the sort of big trophies is what it's there for. And that's what these kids put the hard yards in academy football for, to put themselves in a position where they've got the opportunity to be this sort of superstar name. And I mean, in our minds, obviously he's only just come into the first team, and yet all of a sudden we are so reliant on the kind of trickery and the kind of individualism that he brings to the table. That, I mean, you look down our team. I mean, Adam Lallana, yeah, okay, I think he could probably do the sort of things that Dibling can do, but he's 36, 37 years old now, so he
hasn't got the legs.
Is it that much? He's coming towards the end of his career, and you might see flashes from him occasionally, but you're looking towards the younger players who are going to be starting games and hopefully playing 90 minutes on a regular basis. And he's the guy that is going to be front and center of it all now, I think, which brings challenges of its sort of in itself, because a lot of teams will have done scouting and they'll know, oh, they've got this youngster who's got potential, who might break through at some point this season. We should have some tape on him. But everybody would have seen that first half yesterday, and all of a sudden now, actually our tactical setup is going to be two-pronged now, because obviously I think first and foremost you want to get the ball into his feet as much as possible, but also realistically he's going to be doubled up on a lot. He's going to get the shit kicked out of him a lot. I mean, you look at his shin pads that are barely bigger than a credit card. Those are going to be targets for the rest of the season, but that offers opportunities elsewhere on the pitch, because if they're doubling up on one flank, that means that somewhere else on the pitch there's space for us, and it's about how we use that space. Can we first and foremost make sure that Tyler Dibling doesn't have his legs broken, but then secondary, how can we use the space that his attention is attracting? So yeah, there's opportunities there when you've got someone that good. And yeah, savour him while we can, because let's be honest, I'll give it 2 years tops.
2 years. We'll make some predictions.
mine. He was the most fouled player yesterday, obviously, and everyone would have been able to guess that. It's
I'm surprised that it wasn't Bruno Fernandes the way he goes down.
There were a few sort of mumbles of discontent when he went off, Glen, but I think they said afterwards that he was struggling a little bit. So it's going to be about managing him and managing our expectations as well to a certain extent.
People have very short memories. You've only got to go back to Tino Livramento, Romeo Lavia to see what happens when you play young players week in, week out for 90 minutes, and you become reliant on them too quickly. It's a big change, and the body has to be able to withstand playing, Premier League football. We're talking about the players who got dropped yesterday, who are all a lot older than Tyler Dibling, and they are struggling to come to terms with the pace of Premier League football. So, Dibling looks to the manner born, but physically, it doesn't matter how good you are if you're that young. I don't think he's been 18 even that long.
March,
it's a difficult thing to go from regularly playing academy football to suddenly playing in the Premier League. So it's 60 minutes was enough, especially as the game was. Let's face it, we weren't going to get back into it at that stage. We have, we've signed. So, that's what I think Russell Martin did with the substitutions. Basically, I think he thought, okay, we need to change the front line. We might get back into it. But I want to get Ross Stewart on the pitch. I want to get Max Cornet on the pitch. Ryan Fraser hasn't played at all. So let's get those on the pitch and see how they used the last half an hour. And unfortunately, the red card happened before they really had a chance to do anything, and that kind of killed it stone dead regarding us as an attacking force. There was a couple of minutes when Lallana got on the pitch, got on the ball. I thought, we might actually go forward a bit now, but the red card killed it. But no, I think it was exactly the right thing to take Tyler Dibling off. Though I would say that the consensus around me was that it wasn't the right thing to do.
Yeah, run him into the ground.
Finally on the Tyler Dibling angle, I suppose. Just for any listeners, obviously, who have heard the story, maybe it's in the back of their head. I don't quite remember the fact that obviously he's been at Southampton since he was 7 or 8 years old. He came through the Bath Satellite Academy, but he left for Chelsea I think about 2 years ago now. He left Southampton, went to Chelsea, went there for a month, didn't like it, and asked to come back. And obviously the club took him, and he told me that they took him back because he's not a half bad player, which I think is an understatement. But he was very grateful to be able to come back. But it's an interesting journey. You don't get many players who go to a top 6 club and then decide that actually this isn't for me. I'm going to go back to where I've been for the last sort of decade. How much that sort of has an impact on when the next big club come calling, and it's a slightly different contract, albeit he was on good money. It's a slightly different, 7 figures. So who knows what that means? But he has had an interesting journey to this point.
I want to talk to you, Alfie, about the goals as well.
Though, isn't it? It's a great story, though, isn't it? Because you look at where's anyone heard from Jimmy J Morgan since he went to Chelsea? Kamari Doyle, anyone heard from him? I know he's Brighton, slightly different, but I think having that little episode you talked about there in his backstory can only be a good thing for the club going forward, and it will hopefully make him think and not jump at the first offer that comes along.
Let's wait and see, shall we? Alfie, I know the goals were keeping you awake at night. I saw you sort of analysing it about 1 o'clock in the morning, weren't you? Poor goals to concede again. I think we should probably just talk about those and briefly move on, but not great. As you said, after that penalty miss, it was just a couple of minutes and the mood changed and things started to go downhill pretty quickly.
Yeah, unbelievably frustrating. Assessing the goals individually, the first one's obviously the first two are both second phases from set plays, which is supremely disappointing considering they conceded from a long throw against Brentford as well. But it looks like it's Flynn Downs who's marking Mattis de Ligt, and I think Leslie Ugachukwu was marking Joshua Xerxes, who are the two that end up being free. But there's a moment where obviously Jack Stevens is playing them all on side, and I don't know if they're caught in two minds about playing the offside line or go in, but all it would have taken is one of them to follow, and they'd have been in space to mark it. And then the second one, we're talking about Cameron Archer again. It's the lack of intensity with the press. They just allow Rashford to shoot, basically, and a player that good, you just can't afford that time and space. That being said, it's a great finish. It's the only place he could have put it where it would have gone in. Ramsdale would have got it anywhere else pretty much in the goal. So it's a good goal. And then the third one, right at the end of the game, is more lack of concentration. It's Taylor Harwood-Bellis, who's 5 or 6 yards deeper than the rest of the line. No one really knows what's going on. But all three of the goals feel like they're avoidable moments. And I think if you went back and looked at however many goals is it now, is 8 they've conceded, you could probably pinpoint a moment where each of them could have been stopped. But that's the Premier League for you. And they need to work on the defensive organisation. Russell Martin teams have always conceded lots of goals, and that can be fine because the trade-off is that they play good football and they score a lot of goals. Last season it was brilliant fun. Nobody was complaining last season really, apart from in a couple games. So they can sort it out, they can do it, but they are going to concede a lot of goals this season unless they ship up, basically.
Let's talk about the red cards. Steve, red card for Jack Stephens, pretty reckless challenge, to be honest. I think I know what you're going to say, but right decision?
Yes. And I'm surprised there was so much kind of sort of, oh, that's never a red card reaction afterwards, especially like sort of scrolling back through my Twitter feed, seeing the number of people that thought it was a nonsense decision, kind of sort of having had the benefit of replays from about 6 or 7 different angles. Obviously live, we only see one angle, and I thought, like, from where I was fairly high up in the northern, it looked to me, well, it's definitely a yellow, and depending on how high he's actually made that challenge, it could easily be a red. And obviously the red comes out, and well, it obviously must be quite high then. And subsequent replays,
I was at the other end, and on first viewing, I thought exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
exactly the same.
But it was one of those situations. Okay, fine, you want to take a yellow for the team because we would have been left short if he'd not made a challenge. But there are ways of doing it, and there are ways of doing it that mean that the worst you're going to get is a yellow card. Going in studs up at knee height is just ridiculous. You know that the likely outcome of this is either you're going to get yourself sent off, or you're basically going to make yourself look an absolute tit by flying in and not getting anywhere near the guy. If you're gonna do one of those sort of take one for the team fouls, then surely I think it's got to be a kind of one of those where you just kind of grab the guy and it's either a shirt pull or almost kind of a sort of tame rugby tackle, if you like. Going in studs up at someone's knee is not the one for me, unfortunately, I'm afraid.
Glenn, same for you. Right decision and straight red.
Yeah. I mean, at first viewing, I thought that could be a red, and I wasn't surprised when the red card came out. It came out very quickly, and to be fair, the referee was spot on. When in real time, I didn't see the initial touch on the knee, on the right knee, I guess it was, as he came through. I saw him hit the ankle of the other foot. And I thought it looked a bit high even there. And then when you see the first replay and you see the first contact is actually on the knee, then there's no argument about it. And it's a shame in a way, because football managers these days, they talk a lot about moments, usually in an attacking context. Defending isn't about moments; it's about consistency. Jack Stephens, Bednarek, Harwood-Bellis, they all had good moments in defence. Jack Stephens put in one absolute blinding tackle on Bruno Fernandes. And bear in mind what a whinnying little twat he is. He actually got up and congratulated him. I couldn't believe it, because it was such a good tackle. But Jack Stephens, you know what you're going to get with him, and you know there's no consistency there. Because if he tried to make that tackle a second time, he'd cart him over, or he'd miss altogether. There's no consistency with him at this level. Bednarek was the same, couple of good blocks, but his brain was frazzled by the end of it. You could see that he was tired. His passing went
100%
completely went. And Harwood-Bellis is having a difficult time stepping up, and he was only on the pitch for 15 minutes. He, as Alfie said, he was majorly out of position for the third goal. He too got some good blocks in. The only thing I kind of pin my hopes on is that in the context of playing in a back four, Bednarek and Harwood-Bellis were our best. At the start of the 25 game run, those two came together, and they were, that was the one sort of period of the season where the goals against dried up. Now, obviously, this is a completely different level, so it's a bit of a reach to expect us to suddenly get clean sheets or whatever. But I think, we have to find the best combination. That's the other thing. It's about combinations. I said at the start, Bednarek and Stevens. Okay, Russell Martin hasn't seen this firsthand, but we've tried it at various times 2-3 years ago. It never really worked. The two of them just don't really seem to dovetail well as a pairing. So I'm hoping, I assume it'll be Harwood-Bellis who comes in for these next 3 games. I'm just hoping that him and Bednarek can be more consistent in their play and not have those moments where you look around and just think, oh my God, what on earth was that?
You'd like to think that Jack Stevens would struggle to get back into the sides, and we're in that kind of situation. But I mean, that might be wishful thinking. Go on, Steve.
Do we think that we might see another of our double-barreled centre backs so suddenly kind of re-emerge? Obviously, we saw Bella Kotchap feature for 20 minutes or so at Cardiff in the last round of the Carabao. Any chance that he starts Tuesday night at Everton?
I think it would be a sensible decision if he does.
That ship sailed, do you think?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't know what it's like. At the end of the day, we're not privy to the private conversations they've had. But ultimately, if he wants to play, if he's happy to play, and I think Russell Martin should be willing to give him a chance. And Tuesday night in the Cup, where it doesn't really matter, is the perfect way to do it. It's still Premier League opposition. Come back in, start the game, play alongside Nathan Wood, I imagine, and give him a chance. So I guess we'll have to see. I'll be a little bit disappointed if he is on the bench behind Ronnie Edwards or behind Nathan Wood on Tuesday, just because we know that those two are probably not going to play at the Premier League level this season, or certainly not right away, and that's fine because they're young players. But with Amo-Ameyaw, we've seen that he can do it at this level if he can be in the right frame of mind and physically fit, which hopefully he is now after having surgery. So yeah, I agree with Steve. I don't necessarily think he's going to be the Lord and Saviour of everything, but you've got to give him a chance.
When did the foreign transfer windows all shut? Like Saudi and Turkey and stuff like that, because that may have a bearing on it as well. I mean, they played him against Cardiff. They played him against Cardiff. I assumed to show everybody that he could still play,
and he was fit.
And he was fit. So if all the transfer windows are closed and he's definitely going to be here until January at least, then I'd totally agree. You've got to give him a chance to play. Especially as things aren't going particularly well in the defence at the moment. I don't think he's the answer, to be honest. I know a lot of people have been clinging to the hope. He's got the best pedigree out of all of our centre backs, being a full German international and all that. But to me, there's something not quite right between the ears with that guy. And he's been a Saints player for 2 and a bit years now, and he's never really looked particularly committed to the club. So. Yeah, I'm not expecting him to be the saviour, I have to say.
Okay. Well, we'll get on and preview that Everton game in just a moment. I want to do Player of the Week as well. I think we've got our first name on the sheet for that already. Anything else on Manchester United? Anything on the subs and Ross Stewart coming in? Anything on the starter player? We kind of covered that all, I guess.
Aaron Ramsdale
looked interested. I thought he was fairly lively. Couple of nice little layoffs. Lovely little sort of interplay between him, Downs, I think it was, and Cornet. I mean, Cornet. I think I'm already kind of pinpointing him as one of those runs fast, gets into good positions, and then final ball is a little bit hit and miss.
We've had a few of those over the years.
Yes, I'm hoping that we can kind of just get one of those little spells out of him, like when he was at Burnley, where kind of more of what he tried came off than didn't. And if you can just get a little get a little run of games out of him where that happens, then I think he's going to be very useful, because he's kind of one of these players that actually we don't really have another similar type of player. I mean, people will say Sulemana, but let's be honest, the guy wasn't getting a game in the Championship. So Cornet is a relatively proven quantity at this level, and we don't have many of them. So I think he's going to be quite important. Wouldn't be surprised to see him start Tuesday night, just because obviously he's not played much football. Get him kind of up to speed and able to start if that's the route we want to go down. It may well be that there's a future starting position either side of a central striker. And yeah, it'd be nice to have a few different options that we can go between, because I mean, going back to our earlier conversation, obviously we've seen in not too distant past where we've flogged these young talents to death, and they've ended up with long-term injuries, and we then can't call upon them. So I think, yeah, Tyler Dibling's minutes have still got to be managed, and that means that we need people who can play in that position too.
Sure.
So yeah, hopefully Cornet's the guy there. Fraser, I suspect, will be slightly more sparingly, just because of his little bit of his age, his stature. But we'll see.
A good option.
Yeah, having options is better than not having options.
And Glenn, I guess Aaron Ramsdale, you saved some important saves, and it's been a tough start, hasn't it? Conceding 6 goals in 2 games, but
six goals, none of which have been his fault, and he must be wondering about his life.
What
choices.
have I done?
Yeah, I think there must have been an element of that, and it was noticeable at the end of the game that he was the first player that Russell Martin went to. So I think with Ramsdale, he really seems to care. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. You know, you hope all players care, but he seems to be one that takes it quite hard when we get beat. I mean, he's been playing for Arsenal for 2 years in and around their squad, so obviously they don't get beat off, and all of a sudden he's having to get used to, you know, letting in 3 goals a game when he's basically had a good game. Yeah, and that's I imagine can be very disheartening. But you know, again, I heard you guys talking last week about he's an amazing signing for us, and he is a, you know, regardless of what Arsenal fans will tell you on Twitter, he is a very good goalkeeper, and for me, he's an absolute shoo-in for our Player of the Year already. I can just see this coming. He's just going to be so busy, and there's going to be games that he wins for us, hopefully, and games where he keeps the score down. So I just hope he can keep his chin up, and you know, put the bad games, you know, or the bad experiences out of the way, because it must have been quite disheartening yesterday to have played as well as he did and still let in 3 goals. But no, I thought he was tremendous, and long may it continue.
Let's do TSP Player of the Week. If you're watching along live, let us know who impressed you. Tyler Dibling took Player of the Week last time out, for the second time already this season. I think there's a trend developing here already. Steve, we've been waxing lyrical about him. A few others as well. Who are we going to put into the poll?
I mean, I think obviously Dibling's going to be first name in there. I'll happily throw Ramsdale in there as well. As Glenn rightly says, he's not been at fault for any of the 6 goals he's had to pick out the back of the net, but there's just a presence there in defence, sort of behind the defence, and I think over time, I think that will kind of increase the confidence levels. I mean, the end of the day, he's been in the door 2.5 weeks, so he's not going to have that sort of working relationship with the defenders in front of him from day one. That takes time, but I think you can already see that there is more confidence in him than there ever was in Alex McCarthy. That's no slight on Alex McCarthy. That's just
fact.
It's just facts. It's just levels. McCarthy is a keeper that, I mean, at the end of the day, if he'd started last season, we'd have probably been more or less in a similar position, I think. Maybe slightly fewer goals scored, because I think we wouldn't have been able to be quite so fluid in terms of playing it out. But he's kind of fine. But I think Ramsdale is a level sort of way above kind of any goalkeeper we've had for a while, actually. Like, even, I mean, I'd say probably on a par with kind of peak Forster, sort of pre-knee injury. And yeah, now all we have to do is get a defence and a midfield worthy of its name in front of him to give him a fighting chance.
All right, so we'll put Dibling, we'll put Ramsdale. Alfie, anybody else you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add Yuki
Sugawara.
Sugawara. I think he linked up well with Tyler Dibling. He put the ball in that Glen mentioned for Leslie, which could have been a goal. Yeah, but they're probably the only three that I think we should dominate this week, unless Glen has someone different in mind.
And Glenn, we'll put Aaron Ramsdale down for you, shall we?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say Sugawara as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think those three are the ones worth mentioning.
Those the three, right. Well, it's a break from the league on Tuesday evening. We've got the trip to Everton in the League Cup. Somewhere closer to home would be nice, but it is what it is. Alfie, last time we had 11 changes. Do you think we'll see that again, or is he likely to stick with a team similar to the one from the weekend?
No, I don't know. It might be 11 changes, but it'd be a different type of squad, I think. He took 5 or 6 academy players on the bench last time and gave a couple of debuts out. He's not going to do that this time. I think it's going to be a strong squad, and I think we've sort of touched on a couple of the guys who could come in. Ross Stewart's going to start from the bench again. He's not going to start the game. But Ryan Fraser, Maxwell Cornet maybe, and Adam Armstrong didn't even get off the pitch, by the way. We didn't get on the pitch, we didn't mention. He's gone from being the man who we pinned the goals on, and 3 weeks later he's not even coming on as an option. So he'll start. He'll be itching to go. Hopefully he gets a penalty and scores it, which will be nice.
Just to prove a point.
Yeah, exactly. So I think
narrative Claxon.
I think the guys like Matty Fernandez, Tyler Dibling, they're the ones that will come out. Will Smallbone, if he's fit, will come in. Joe Rebo should come in, and I imagine Alex McCarthy will get a game. James Bree, I mentioned Nathan Woods, and Charlie Taylor, I imagine, will start as well. So it could end up being 11 changes, but I think it would just be a very different look to what it maybe felt like last time.
Steve, Goodison Park is famous for many things over the years, not least, I think, a Nathan Jones away win. So your thought, are you going to this one? What's your thought on
Absolutely
Tuesday night?
not, no.
And I didn't think you would.
I mean, I hate Goodison Park. Never a good experience as a Saints fan there. So I kind of feel as if I'm going to be bullied into going in May, when it's just solely because it's the last ever game there.
The last chance.
But yeah, if it had come, if we'd been, the league game had been sort of January or October or whatever, it'd been like, no, I'll give that one a swerve. It just doesn't interest me, that place. We've got such an awful record. It's a terrible ground. It's the worst away end in the league by a country mile. And yeah, and I mean, I think I read earlier that the coaches are leaving St Mary's at 11 o'clock. So I mean, if you look at how long that's going to take to get up there, and
back,
and likely getting home at like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, that's just, that doesn't bear thinking about, I think, for a midweek one now, especially when priorities are so very clearly elsewhere. I mean, Everton will probably make fairly wholesale changes themselves, but I mean, they're able to spend that. I mean, despite the fact that, I mean, they've been on the brink of going bust for seemingly 3 years, they're still able to make £35 million signings. So yeah, they've got enough talent there to be able to make a lot of changes and still be able to put a fairly strong side out. So yeah, I mean, it's not going to be an easy game, that one, that's for sure.
Whichever way you look at it, Glenn, I mean, Everton are essentially a club in a bit of a mess, aren't they? So it's an opportunity, but as Steve said, it's not been a happy hunting ground for us, and it certainly won't be a walk in the park.
No, I mean, if you want to look at the draw in a positive light, it's a step up in opposition, standard of opposition from Cardiff. But things have changed a little bit now, and a number of players who played against Cardiff, their status has changed a little bit. Like Dibling and Fernandez, they're now part of the Premier League starting 11. So be interesting to see whether will Sam Amo get a game or will it be more likely to be Max Cornet and people like that?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's going to be a tough game. Obviously, they're the only team keeping us off the bottom of the league at the moment, but it's not strictly relevant. In days gone by, you'd have said, "Oh, it could be an important morale booster for the league," but that's not really relevant these days because it's a completely different starting 11 in most cases. So, I mean, I don't really. Yeah, I agree with Steve. It's a bit like Leicester in that. They seem to have been in financial trouble for ages, but they're still making ridiculous signings. And they signed a couple of players on the, we'll buy your youngster for a stupidly overinflated amount, and you do the same with ours, sort of thing. I think they did one deal with Chelsea, was it, or was it Villa? Can't remember. But yeah, I mean, it'll be a tough game. Games against Sean Dyche teams, there's going to be a large element of physicality to it, so maybe going with the more experienced players in this game would be the way to go. But no, it's a break from the league. It's a game that, in all truth, doesn't really matter unless you are stupid enough to be going to the game.
If anybody's going,
and if you are, if you are,
fair play. 1,000, which I find absolutely
lunatics. Yeah, honestly, I take my
hats off.
My hat off. If I had a hat, I'd take it off. That's. Yeah, I mean, if you go into that game, you deserve some sort of medal. But so hopefully we can bring it home. Didn't we win on penalties there last time?
Yes, we
Carabao.
did.
Yeah. So let's have some more of that.
Well, that was that long ago that Theo Walcott scored for them.
Blimey, right. Okay, we'll get on to the Ipswich game in just a moment. TSP's been growing at an amazing rate on YouTube over the last few seasons. We're nearing 3,000 subscribers, which is incredible when you consider that it was only 3 years ago we started streaming this podcast on YouTube every week. So a huge thank you to everyone who's subscribed in that time. If you don't already, you might be watching us live tonight. If you enjoy watching TSP on a Sunday each week, or the various videos that we post out on the social channels, we really appreciate it if you would subscribe here on YouTube, because we love seeing all your positive comments. We like the negative ones as well. Everything's welcome. We love the feedback. We really enjoy all your feedback, and we really want to kind of continue to grow as a community on here. So if you are watching us on YouTube, give us a little like, give us a subscribe, and you'll be the first to see all of the new videos.
Tell your friends.
This is where it's at. So Saturday, I'm going to say, it's the big one. Ipswich visit St Mary's in the Premier League. We've also got a bit of a score to settle. The first of two teams we'll face this year. We did the double over us last season. Glen, nervous about this one already, or a chance to get 3 points on the board?
Well, it's definitely a chance to get 3 points on the board. I mean, we talked about the Man United game, and we've kind of, implicitly said that games against Manchester United are not going to define the season. At the end of the day, they're a massive club. But Ipswich, because we've lost to Manchester United and we've lost the 3 games before that, suddenly it becomes huge. We certainly cannot afford to lose it. We have to get on the board at this game. And yeah, you could argue that we really need to win it, being as it's a home game against a fellow promoted team. Having said that, Ipswich, I have to say, have looked better than we have so far. They got a very good result at Brighton, 0-0 draw, which I certainly would have been happy with. I think they've had a draw at home to someone else. Can't remember who it was. Fulham, I think. And the first 2 games they had Liverpool, Man City, so they were write-offs anyway. So yeah, they've done okay. I think, even though they haven't won yet, I think Kieran McKenna will be quite happy with the start that they've made. Added a few players since last season. Calvin Phillips is the interesting one, trying to get his career back on track. And they've had a couple that we knew from the Championship in Sam Smolitz and Liam Delap. So we have to hope that they can't handle the step up either. Though I think both of them have scored. Is that right?
I don't remember Liam Delap scoring. He might have done.
Yeah,
Smolitz against Fulham. Yeah, you're right, Glenn. Both of them have had a goal.
Yeah, both of them have scored. So yeah, they'll go into it with a bit of confidence, and they'll see us as a team, obviously, that they can. They beat us twice last year, so Yeah, the midfield will be interesting because they've got that Sam Morsey, who's one of those players who plays with some sort of cloak of invisibility. He's about 20 fouls a game, and he gets booked once in the 86th minute. He's that sort of player, so it'll be interesting to see if he gets away with that as much in the Premier League. And obviously they're going to have him with Calvin Phillips, so that's quite a combative midfield. So Flynn Downs and Leslie Ugochukwu are going to have their work cut out with those two, I think. So that'll be where I feel the battle will be won and lost. So it's it's a big game, and I think as fans we've certainly got to play our part with that one, because we can't afford to have any negativity going into that game, and I'm quite hopeful about it. You know, the half hour against Manchester United was the first time this year where I thought we actually have it in us to be a functioning team at this level. Obviously, we've got to do it for longer than 30 minutes, but I was encouraged by that, and that's what I'm kind of taking into this game, and the hope that we can finally get on the board.
It's a fair point, Alfie. I think a lot of us will be saying the same thing this week. Your season isn't defined by how you get on at Anfield or the Etihad or at home to Manchester United, but it is defined by Ipswich at home. There's no way of getting around that.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people are in a state of panic at the moment, and fair enough. There's 4 bad results and whatnot, but I do feel these are the sort of games where the average fan, I think, is fully behind what's happening, fully behind Russell Mind. There'll be obviously some who disagree, and that's totally fair enough. But these are the sort of games where I think if you end up getting beaten at home to Ipswich, the needle just moves slightly, and people start to think, well, that's a problem. This Russell Mind likens the Man United game to the Leeds one last year, where they've been beaten 4 in a row and then played at home and they turned it around. Well, now it's very similar to the Leeds one. It's a team that obviously they know well. They've lost 4 in a row now, and they need to turn it around now. The one thing about you mentioned the 2 strikers who've scored a goal, Sam Swanix and Liam Delap, and Liam Delap I think is a handful. We know what Sam Swanix can do in the tier below, but this is probably the first game where I look at the opposition front line. I'm not, touch wood, I'm not tempting fate here, but it doesn't look like a front 4 where you make one mistake and they score every single time. They're probably going to be a little more similar to Southampton this season. Difference is they've got a couple of draws in the last 2 games and they've got 2 points on the board result. But I don't look at Wes Burns and Murray Hutchinson, although he scored last season, and even Liam Delap and Sammy as someone you make one mistake and you lose the game. So I think maybe that might bring a bit more wiggle room for Saints, and it might be a little bit less relentless, a little bit less ruthless than it's been in the last few games. So they have to go into this one hoping to win. They have to go into it looking to win. I think it could well be the same 11, maybe 1 or 2 changes from last weekend, depending on what he thinks about the front. Oh, well, good point, yeah. But Taylor Harwood-Bellis straight stop, good point. But then took a couple more, maybe does he think Ben Brereton, Diaz, Cameron Archer, do they go again? But other than that, I think you go the same way. I think you have to win this game.
Can you sense a nervous stadium already, Steve? That first sort of 15, 20 minutes is going to be quite key.
No, I think the nervousness kind of comes as things kind of progress. I think we start absolutely fine in terms of atmosphere, and I don't think I think that's always been the case. Like even going back like a couple of years ago when we were absolutely dreadful. The support was always there from the start, but it was as games kind of progressed and things kind of got worse and worse in terms of what we were watching. I think that was where kind of nervousness or anger or disappointment, whichever emotion you want to throw at it, because there were a whole range of them in that season. To go with the whole range of different managers and different team systems. So I think, I think from the start, I'm not concerned in terms of atmosphere and that sort of thing. I think the Northern Wall has actually been, I missed the Forest game, but I was there yesterday. And yeah, there was plenty of atmosphere for probably an hour. I think it was probably 15, 20 minutes into the second half where probably just after the substitutions, actually, where things kind of settled down. And I think there was probably an acceptance that the game was petering out in the way that it did. But that's against Manchester United, where they've got quality players who can just control that game and they don't need to take any risks. I mean, United are a particularly good example of a team that when they're in a situation where they have to take risks, that's when they make a bit of a pig's ear of it and they come a cropper against sides like us. But we didn't take advantage of those moments in the first half. But I think Ipswich is a completely different proposition where when you look at the bookies probably make us slight favourites, maybe, solely on the basis of home advantage. But realistically, they're not going to be able to call it. It's not like Newcastle away, we were massive underdogs. Yesterday, massive underdogs. Forest, I think, were even slight favourites in our game, despite their abject away record in the Premier League since they got promoted. Although, of course, they went and won at Anfield yesterday, which was not what anybody
Funny.
would.
What it was.
Oh, yes, very, very amusing. But yeah, I think you go into Ipswich with everyone's still supporting the team. There's nobody's given up at this stage. Absolutely not. I mean, anybody who kind of claims that they have, it's like, well, I mean, why are you bothering? What was the point of last season? At any stage, like why would you even bother with supporting a team that doesn't win every week? Because it's there's no emotion better than when you, like in football, than when you've kind of won against the odds, and we are fighting those at the moment. And it's one of those where you do need all hands on deck. And I mean, it's not going to be the same as West Brom, obviously, but that sort of atmosphere from the start gives us the best opportunity.
Did I read yesterday? I think we lost the first 4 games last time when we came back up and finished 14th. So
yeah, I mean, it was a slightly harder fixture list there. We had City away, Man United home, Wigan home, and Arsenal away. The Man United game we should have won. Even City away, we should probably have got a point.
Yeah, we'd have all been pinning our hopes on the home game, wouldn't we? We'd have all been on that.
But actually, that Wigan game's our worst performance because everybody lumped all the eggs into that basket, thinking, well, this is the one where we've got to get points. And it took the international break after the 4th game, where we then came back and we were awful in the first half against Villa as well in that first home game after the international break, 1-0 down and could have been 2 or 3, but we held it together and absolutely smashed them second half.
And of course, we finished 14th, so maybe that is the omen. Glenn, is this the kind of the real sort of benchmark for our progress at the moment? I know we sort of touched on the games that we weren't really expected to win, but this is where we're going to actually see where we are, where we think we are.
Yeah, I mean, I see the 3 games pre-international break. I see that as Russell Martin giving last season's players a chance, and now the gloves are off really. He's picked a starting lineup for that Manchester United game that I think most people would have picked, and I think that will be what we do going forward, except for where there's catastrophic loss of form or red cards or whatever. I can see us playing that way, and I hope that in the week coming up with the training and stuff that they will iron out a few little flaws. I mean, the one Steve mentioned about Ugachukwu and Downs, they seemed to. It was almost like they were taking turns to play number 6, and occasionally they both went. And you obviously can't do that against a team like Manchester United. So little things like that they need to iron out, and just try and get Matty Fernandez on the ball as much as possible, and try and attack more through Dibling and Brereton Diaz. Again, we did these things in the first half an hour, but then it kind of went a little bit. Fernandez's position was interesting for me because he was almost playing as a second striker at times. He was right up in support of Archer, and if he's playing that far forward, then Downs and Ugachukwu really do have to anchor that midfield strongly and not get caught out of position. So yeah, I'm hoping another week we'll see us play better. Obviously, it will be drilled into them what to do if we do go 1-0 down. or do miss a penalty again, or have any sort of setback that we need to respond to.
I suppose the one thing we're worried about that, Glenn, is that we had this conversation last season, didn't we? And I think it was particularly at the start of the season rather than towards the end. But we had conversations where one thing would go wrong, and then all of a sudden there'd be a flurry of either goals.
It's a lack of leadership, and that and there's no excuse. There's no excuse because we've got enough players. It's not just the captain and the manager. We've got enough players there with a lot of experience, like Bednarek, Walker-Peters, Downs. They're all. It's not like we got a team of 20-year-olds. They should have responded better, and there should have been a collective. I know it's a horrible cliche. Right, we go again. There shouldn't have been this, oh shit, heads down, and 2 minutes later we're 1-0 down. That just shouldn't have happened. And even at 1-0 down, there should have been this collective, right, we're getting to half time, only one behind, and and it just wasn't there yesterday. So they do have to get that mentality right, and and play for half time, maybe waste time, get a bit more savvy about things. And that has to happen very quickly, because if we play in this sort of naive fashion like we did after we missed the penalty, then more and more games are going to run away from us. But I mean, that shouldn't, as you say, that shouldn't happen against Ipswich. We should have a bit more latitude to make mistakes, if you like, against Ipswich. But I do anticipate us being better with roughly the same format that we had on Saturday.
Something that I did pick up from Russell Martin in the press conference on that yesterday after the game was, and you can always tell, I think Russell gives a lot away by what he doesn't say, really, sometimes, the players he doesn't name. But one of the things he said was that bringing in Adam Lallana and Aaron Ramsdale, specifically named those two, is what's going to help with that sort of collapse, I suppose, this season. So the fact that he specifically named Aaron Ramsdale, I think he's clearly, as you said, Glenn, somebody who is vocal in the dressing room, who obviously has untold experience compared to the rest of the group. So we just have to hope that he in particular does add a bit, and I think he will.
Anything else we need to consider about Ipswich before we do the score predictions?
Well, yeah, I don't know where Benjamin Bloom is. We had this discussion, but now they've got Ed Sheeran involved. They've gone all big time, haven't they? So
it does seem weird previewing an Ipswich game without him being on. Just
absolutely.
As far as the score predictions, only 2 people out of our 84 patrons got the correct score this week. So
not easy, is it?
Walter Horn and Robert Atkins for getting 3 points. There are some new faces at the top of the leaderboard as well, and a few people have been asking when they can find that. We share it on the social media, so it'll be on X, it'll be on Facebook, it'll be on Instagram, usually just before the match on a Saturday morning. So have a search for @TotalSaintsPod and you can get involved there. Let's do some predictions for Ipswich, Steve.
Oh, God. Sod it, we're getting off the mark. 2-1 win.
With a point, not just 1 point, 3 points.
All the way.
Okay, Alfie?
Yeah, I'm making it up on the spot, but I was going to go for 2-1, but I'll go for a 1-0 win. I don't know why.
This is all very positive. I don't know why. I think I'll go for the 1-1 draw. We'll take a point, and that'll be a start. Glenn?
I'll go for absolute carnage, 3-2 win.
Oh, nice.
Strong. All right. If you're watching,
I was going to say 2-1, but there you go.
Just a couple of admin bits to finish on the FPL after game week 4. I have some news. Charlie Hawkins is currently first, 298 points. TSP's very own Ben is second with 278, but Alfie is right behind in third place.
Nice one.
With 277 points. Just for the record, Steve 30th at the moment, and Glenn 35th. With 209 points. But there's a long way to go. So don't forget, I mentioned the Predictions League. You can follow the Total Saints podcast on all the social media platforms. It's @Total Saints Pod. And you can check out the merch store as well. Loads of cracking bits in there. It's shop.totalsaints.co.uk. You'll also find us on Patreon. That's where you can support the podcast with your monthly contribution. Just visit patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast to find out more. And each of the tiers comes with the different perks, including some weekly shouts for the patrons in both our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tier. So thank you to Dave Melton, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, and James Kibbe. They're in the Francis Benali tier. And also to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrup, Matt Hall, Mark Littlewood, Mike Etheridge, and James Bobin, who are in our Mick Shannon tier. Also, thanks again to Paul Castle Associates and our friends at Steamtown Brewery for sponsoring TSP this season. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Alfie. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to that YouTube channel, and we'll see you again next week.